Today, I want to touch on identity and career and how those things go hand in hand. Now, let me tell you, there's something about walking in this career path that can actually be very daunting. You know, you've done the work, you've put in the effort, you've gone back to school, you know, the numbers are adding up. Finally, things are working out. You're able to afford the things that you want to afford, but still something feels off or you still feels empty. And so the question is, if this is not it, then what is? And I think a lot of times is because our identity has probably shifted into what I like to call a career identity. We identify ourselves based on the goals that we have achieved. So when that is taken away, something feels off, or when that is probably at its fullest and you're still feeling empty, then it means that still there is work that needs to be done. Today we look at what that looks like, anchoring your identity in something more than career. My name is Jane. Welcome to Make an Impression. I created this space because I want to help you who is a woman of faith and you're probably struggling with fear. You don't know what to do here and there. You're still feeling a bit hesitant. This space is for you because I want to help you overcome that fear so that you can start living at your most authentic self through faith and bold action. Let's dive into today's conversation. Now, let's be honest. There is nothing as difficult as sitting down at the end of the day and still feeling empty. You've put in the work, you've put in the hours. For some of us, sometimes we are like, we are almost getting to our 10,000th hour and probably something is not giving. It can be frustrating. And I can imagine for a career woman, working hard, going through the ranks, you know, especially as a woman, just being able to boss up and get to that point and still feel empty. That can be very frustrating. So I'd like us to go through these things that I know can help us understand, you know, what identity is and how we can start looking at it so that we can stop living from a place of unfulfillment and start living from a place of fulfillment. I'd like to start by saying that when your identity is built on something that can shift, in this case we are looking at career, then instability is inevitable. Jobs change, careers change, you know, job titles change. Today you have a big title, tomorrow you don't have it anymore, and all these shifts. So if our identity is probably rooted in something that we are proud of, that we have achieved, that we have worked so hard. And I know probably you're sitting there and you're saying, you don't know what you're saying, Jane. I pulled myself up from the gutter. I worked hard. I put in the work. I put in the hours. I remember the sleepless nights. I hear you. But if your identity is stuck on those things, that's why you're always finding yourself empty. Or sometimes you're just seated and you're thinking, I've really put in the work. Why do I still feel like something is missing? And if it is not this work that I have put in, then what is it? Because that is the confusion and that is the frustration that we keep being stuck on, especially once you get to your 35th end. You start asking a lot of these questions. But I want us today to discuss about an identity that is not connected to our careers, that is not connected to what we have achieved, but an identity that we can stick with because it does not shift, it does not change with seasons, it does not change with what is happening around us. And if that is stable, then now we are able to navigate, you know, all these things that keep shifting in our lives and all these different seasons in a much more open way. I think for me, the first thing is knowing who you are outside of performance. The problem with living in a performative state is that if that performance goes to sleep, you don't know who you are. Or if somebody strips you away and takes out that performance, you don't know who you are. You don't know what to become. You don't know what to do because you built your identity on performance. You build on your identity on an imagery. You build your identity on something that has probably worked out for you up to this point. But now when that performance is removed, or when there's nobody to perform to, or when there's nobody who's no longer interested in your performance, then you're left empty. So we are going to start by tackling that we cannot build our identities on performance. And how do you know that you have built your identity on performance? Is that you're not able to separate what you do from who you are. That is the first and easiest way to know that you've been operating from a state of performance. You cannot separate who you are and what you do, because those are two very different things. There's who you are. At the core of who you are, you know, what are your values? What do you believe in? What do you not believe in? What are the things that are non-negotiable for you? What are the things that, you know, what are your boundaries? What are the things that you look at and you say, I cannot go past this? If you can't separate that, because that is who you are, from what you do, then that's how you know you're operating from a performative state. So we can start there. Just do a little exercise. Do I know who I am? Do I know what I believe in? Do I know the things that I stick with, the things that, you know, sort of like identify who I am? Can I separate them from what I do, whether that is your work or anything else that you do? If you can separate those two things, then now we are talking. But if you still feel like, you know what, a bit of what I do is a bit of who I am and a bit of this and a bit of that, you're still confused and you're not getting the balance, this conversation is, you know, has come to you on time, because it's time to stop performing and time to start anchoring our identity in something that is stronger than just career. The other thing is that identity is not discovered in titles, it is revealed in alignment. Now, let me tell you, there's something about these titles that we get in life that can actually shift how we look at ourselves. The minute you become MD, the minute you become CEO, the minute you become CFO, you know, all those big names, something shifts. And automatically, as humans, we tend to feel proud. I mean, I have come all this way to a CFO. Come on, that's a big deal. You know, it's something to be appreciated. But then the problem is, if that's what sticks in our minds and if that's what starts running who we are, then that's a problem, because now we have shifted our identity to be engulfed in this role that we have, as opposed to in who we are. Identity is not discovered in titles, it is revealed in alignment. So when you're aligned in your purpose, when you're aligned in what you're doing, when you're aligned in what God has called you to do, something shifts, because your identity is no longer pegged on a title. It is pegged on something bigger. It is pegged on your purpose. It is pegged on this thing that God has called you to do. And when you're operating from that space, you see, confidence is not coming from a title. It's coming from being aligned, because when I am aligned, I am automatically confident, as opposed to when I'm being called the CFO of this and this and this. I would rather know that I am aligned and what I'm chasing is what God has put for me, and that would give me more confidence, because I know that my identity is not just stuck on some random title, but it is stuck on a journey that is aligned. I am now moving in purpose. And so there's a lot of clarity in the things I do, in how I move. You know, even when seasons and situations change in my life, an identity is something that sticks, because that becomes an anchor. And I know, guys, a lot of the videos I'm talking about nowadays, I'm really talking about identity, because if you're not rooted in an identity that cannot be shaken, if it has carried you up to this point, but it is just performance, if it has carried you up to this point, but it's just a title, that can be taken away. But if you are in alignment, if you're moving in alignment with what God has called you to do, if you're moving in alignment with the things that you're supposed to do, that is not shaken, even when seasons change in your life. I think the first thing is release the pressure of wanting to figure it all out at once. Let me tell you, we are always stressing ourselves, trying to figure it out. We are trying to figure out our lifestyle, our, exercise, our bodies, our health, our like, there's so many things we are trying to figure out, and because of that pressure, we are constantly living in a state of anxiety, or we are always in a space where we keep asking, who am I? But if we release that pressure, and just start from a point of understanding, what is my identity? Who am I really? What do I believe in? What are my strengths? What are my weaknesses? Let's start at that point, rather than starting at, this is where I am at. in my career? I mean, is this it? Is this what life is? Is this my final destination? Me, sometimes I always say, ata sahi vile nangangana, I'm like, I don't know what I'm doing. I'm doing this, I'm scared. No. I'm like, probably I'll figure out this life thing when I'm 50 years. Like, probably the light bulb moment will come at 45. And so if you release that pressure and you just focus on walking in alignment, just asking God to help you to walk in alignment with what He has called you to do, to help you walk in alignment with your purpose, to help you, even as you make decisions regarding your career, even as you make decisions regarding going back to school, studying this, taking this extra course. Is it in alignment to what God has called you to? Is it in alignment to where your strengths lie? Is it in alignment? Because those things relieve you the pressure of, I have to have this to become this, or this is what is needed to become this. How about this is what God is working on? Probably it's not even the qualifications. Maybe it's just a personality trait that needs to change. And so if you are not in alignment, if you're operating under the pressure of the physical world, where the world is telling you lazima upate masters, PhD, upate hii ndio ufike hapa, probably you don't even need all that. First of all, what is your personality like? How are you going to lead? And you're probably struggling with identity. How are you going to lead if you're probably struggling with anger? Simple things that we don't think are important, but because the noise of the world, has put us in this state of pressure where we are like, niko karibu kufika fourth floor na sijafanya hii, sijafika hapa. Yani, the pressure is real, I'm telling you. But I'm learning to understand that what matters more is alignment. So that has helped me kind of like tone down on the pressure of wanting to be this and this and this before this age, or wanting to achieve this and this and this before I get here. And, looking at my career and thinking, what the hell, that feeling is very real. But am I in alignment? Am I moving in alignment? Am I feeling fulfilled? Is there purpose here? Is there promise here? Is there glory here? All these things that that are helping you stay anchored in an identity that is outside of what you do. It's outside of what you do. Then what is that? What does that look like for you? That's what we should be pursuing. Hey there, before we dive further into the video, I would like to introduce you to our Bold Faith and Authentic Identity workbook. This season for me has been about unlearning who I was told to be and rebuilding who I truly am, rooted, honest, and whole. Many of us were taught identities that sounded spiritual but slowly shrinked us. Be strong even when you're breaking. Stay quiet even when something is wrong. Carry it alone because God understands. But strong faith is in silent struggle, and obedience to God is in self-erasure. That's why I created this workbook. This workbook is not loud. It does not rush you. It does not demand answers you're not ready to give. It offers solace, understanding, and a safe place to rebuild your identity with God without silencing your story or minimizing your pain. It's not about revisiting the past in detail or forcing quick healing. It's about gently peeling back the layers of who you were told to be and rediscovering who you are beneath it all. My desire is that this will help you answer the question, who am I beneath the labels, expectations of others, and survival modes? Inside, you'll find reflective prompts to identify false identities formed through survival, faith-anchored exercises that invite honesty without shame, space to process, pray, and rebuild from a deeper place of truth, gentle guidance for women navigating transition, grief, clarity, or quiet courage. If you're in a season of unlearning, redefining, and choosing truth over endurance, this workbook was created with you in mind. Check out our website www.makeanimpression.org and grab yourself a copy. I do look forward to seeing the transformation that this workbook will do for you. I think the other thing is asking yourself, who am I becoming in this season? Because we have different seasons in our lives and we focus so much on, I'd want to say on probably things that also matter. We look at our financial state. Where are we financially? Have we achieved the goals that we had set out for ourselves? But I think I'm learning more to ask, what is God teaching me in this season that I am in? Yes, I'm still struggling in my finances, or I'm still trying to balance this thing of motherhood and work and family and all these things. But what is God teaching me in this season? Because that is also part of my identity. That is also part of having clarity, having a mindset that shifts from what are my achievements to what am I learning? What should I be focusing on in this season? What is my lesson in this season? How am I supposed to grow? What is God preparing me for the season that is about to come based on what is happening now? Those, you get the difference between the questions that are taking you towards the line of alignment, as opposed to the questions that are taking you towards the line of career identity, where you're thinking, kama nataka hii title, what do I need to do? How about in this season, what do I need to learn as I walk towards the same title that I am also aspiring to, become or grow into in my career path? I think the last thing I would like us to talk about is that transition requires honesty. So as you're thinking about transitioning in your career, growing, or just changing where you are, probably you're thinking, I might have to just do a whole 360 and start all over again. That's also fine. But are you starting from a space of identity? Are you starting from a space of clarity? Or are you continuing with that space of noise where you're still looking for this, looking here, searching here, and maybe the answer is right before your eyes? You just need to be in alignment to what God has called you to be. You just need to be in alignment to your purpose. You just need to get that clarity, is what I'm doing, is what I'm chasing really in alignment with what God wants me to get into? And that's what you're going to be finding in our workbook, the Bold Faith and Authentic Identity workbook. I'm just going to leave a clip here to just give you a little bit of direction or a little bit of knowledge on what is happening in this workbook. But it's really just to give you that clarity, because unless you do the inner work, unless you start from a point of identity, then that's going to be a problem. Because if the foundation is shaky, kama hapa kuna shakiness, there is no clarity, you're just moving with the wind, you're just moving with, tunaenda shughuli nataka mbogi, so tufuatane si wote. By the way, your shughuli nataka mbogi, by the way, just make sure you're registered to vote next year. But really just to say, ensure that you are walking in a path, that your identity is not fixated on your career path. It is not fixated on who you're becoming. It's not fixated on these things that that can shift. Today you're this, tomorrow you're this. But it is anchored in something more stable. It is anchored in something more clear. Because if that is clear, even when the careers shift, even when things change, because sometimes you'll have your highs and the highs will be really high, and sometimes there will be the lows and the lows can be really low. It doesn't mean that it shifts your identity, because it is rooted in something stronger. Thank you so much for tuning in, and I do look forward to seeing you in the next video. Bye.